to be. And to be does not necessarily involve thinking. It just means to be aware. That's all. Most of us live our lives in thought. And because we live our lives in thought, we live in a thought world. And that world is a survival operation. You know, every day we're getting through the day. We're dealing with our negative thoughts and feelings, our fears, our desires, our hopes, our wishes. And we're trying to realize the possibility of being happy, satisfied, and peaceful. The only problem with that is what goes unnoticed is the thought activity is producing an illusion that is at the heart of the problem. And the illusion that the thought activity produces is that there is a character called you. There's a character called you that lives in that body, and it's a personality, and it has a personal history. And it's separate from every other human being on the planet, and it's going to die. It's going to get old, sick, and die. This is being produced by the thought activity because the thought activity is a thinking process in which there is a voice in the head that's talking all the time about what to do, how to act, what's right, what's wrong, how to feel, what not to feel, what not to remember, what to imagine. It's called neurosis. I invite my students to take a few minutes and look up the word neurosis and see if you can come to an understanding that that word's describing your everyday way of being. And it's not necessarily a fun experience. And one of the things that's frustrating more than ever about it is the fact that although we keep attempting to pursue happiness, we never succeed. And the older we get, we realize that whatever we called happiness were those moments in our lives where we got what we wanted. It might have been a marriage. We married the person we wanted to marry. Might have been a new car. Might have been buying a house. It might have been having a baby. There's all kinds of things in life that people pursue in order to be happy, satisfied, and peaceful. And the best that we ever get are temporary periods of having an experience that we call happiness. I call it gratification. If you get what you want, that's gratification. True happiness doesn't come and go. True happiness is a consistent experience, right? And so what the teachings tell us is that true happiness can only be experienced as your true nature. It's not in the world. Almost everybody in the world is pursuing happiness by making money, by trying to be in control, by trying to be recognized, by trying to get love. And it's an ongoing, everlasting process that ends in death. These are what the teachings tell us. And so true happiness is an experience of the existence of your true nature. True happiness is the experience of the existence of your true nature, which is there, which has always been there, which will always be there, but it's been covered over by your personality. This is why some of the greatest spiritual teachers suggest that if you want to wake up to your true nature and experience being happy, go through a process of self-inquiry. Ask the question, who am I? And see if you can stay in that inquiry to get to the realization that you're not this body, there is no self in this body anywhere, and you're not this personality. That's a self-concept. The concept is not real, it's just a concept, right? A self-image is not real, it's just an image. We call it a self-image because we get the idea of what we are reflected back to us. That's why we call it an image. Your parents reflect who you are back to you. And what they reflect back to you is what got reflected back to them, and what got reflected back to their parents, on and on and on and on. So the personality just keeps getting passed on to the next generation. And most of the world lives in that state, lives in that condition. It doesn't work. And usually it takes some crisis, some diagnosis of terminal diagnosis, something the mind can't fix to shake it up enough for people to start to seek the possibility that they might have missed something. Right? So the teachings require attention, require that you contemplate the teachings. The practices require attention and that they require consistency. What I teach here is that if you are serious about getting the value out of this teaching and in this possibility, that meditation needs to be something that you practice every single day without fail. In the Zen tradition, they have arrived at the idea that to sit in meditation for 30 minutes every single day is sufficient. If you're a newbie, if you're a beginner at meditation, that may be asking a lot to sit still for 30 minutes and deal with the restlessness of the mind. So you start out smaller, whatever you can deal with, right? And then work yourself up to 30 minutes. But the important thing is that you do it every single day without fail. Because if you miss a day, the process that the meditation is, which is a process of realizing your true nature, slides back. The personality will regroup, right? And you'll be right back in the neurotic state again. Okay? So, in this class, I don't see myself as the sole teacher of these teachings. There are a lot of people out there today teaching the truth teachings, the wisdom teachings, Eckhart Tolle, Rupert Spira. There's a whole group of contemporary teachers out there now doing retreats. You can just look it up on the internet, and there's a whole supermarket of teaching out there now. And some of these teachers are authentic in terms of them being representing a tradition that is a true tradition that does work. Zen is one of them. If there's a Zen master up in Ithaca that I have developed a relationship with and gone up there and done retreats with him, and he has some books out. One's called A Temporary Affair that I highly recommend. Right? So one of the things I do in this class is I'll drop names of books of other teachers. And I do that on purpose because I want you to look at this from other angles, right? To hear people talk about it in different ways so that you can start to see they're talking about the same thing. And eventually, by doing that over time and practicing, what will happen is you'll see the truth for yourself. You'll see what they've all been talking about, maybe in different angles and different ways, but you'll get it. You'll see that you see what this is that they're talking about. That's very important. It's also very important to experience the experience of waking up. What do I mean by that? The experience of waking up means that if you hear that you're not the personality and you're not the physical body, and you're willing to trust this information and look into it for yourself and establish a truth about it for yourself, at some point, because of your interest and your understanding, at some point, the reality of what you are will see itself. In other words, the awareness that has been what you are all along has been in the background, and the personality has been in the foreground. And you've been taking yourself to be that personality, right? At some point through these teachings and practices, that personality as a form that you take yourself to be weakens enough for the true awareness, your true nature, to be recognized. That's a very important experience to have. That's called waking up. After that experience, right, you're on the path of developing your true nature. Well, you can't develop your true nature. You're on the path of practicing in such a way where the vestiges of your personality will gradually disappear because they were never real in the first place. How hard is it for something that's not real to disappear? It's not hard at all. But given that has been programmed in the brain and the mind, it'll keep coming up and playing, right? So you have to be able to pay attention to it as something that's not real. not you. And if you continually pay attention to it as something that's not real and not you, it loses its grip over you, and you start to experience an experience of natural happiness that's a function of just the fact that you exist as the awareness. Simple as that. So one of the things that happens after people go through an awakening experience is they may have periods where they go back into the personality. When this happens, people say, I had it, but I lost it. People go back into the personality and they say, oh, what happened? Right? I thought I was awake. I thought I was experiencing the truth, right? Well, that is the case, except that the remaining programming of the personality will still come up and attempt to pull your attention, will still come up and attempt to bring you back into the identity of the personality. And eventually, if you stay the course, because persistence is the most important thing in this whole thing, right? Because the personality program will keep trying to pull you back into that form, and so therefore you must persist. You must see it for what it is and persist so you don't keep falling into that trap. And eventually over time, that will weaken, and eventually over time, one of the experiences that people, after awakening, report happening is this thing called the dark night of the soul. I've been talking about it a little bit here because recently I went through a period like that. I had heard about it before, but I didn't really understand it. Now I'm learning a lot about it, right? So one of the teachers that I refer to, her name is Joan Tullison. And she's been teaching spirituality for 20, 25 years. She's an awake person. She's an interesting character. She's a one-armed lesbian who was an alcoholic and a drug abuser when she was younger. And then she woke up. And she started to practice meditation. She started to write about her experiences. She had spiritual teachers. One of her books that she wrote that I really like, that I think is on the money, is called Death, the End of Self-Improvement. So she puts out this, every week she does a writing piece and she posts it out there to a Substack. And this is one of the ways she shares her teaching. So I looked at one of her writings that she posted today called The Story of Light and Dark. And so I'm going to read it with you just to give you an insight of what it's like to be her, what she's talking about here, and how it's relevant to this. The beginnings of autumn, listening to the rain, seeing newborn fawns everywhere. A hummingbird at one point suspended for a long moment right in front of my face, only inches away. The first autumn leaves, the cooler weather, reading 2 more wonderful novels by Charlotte Wood, some lovely Zoom meetings, sunset walks, deep stillness, and the enjoyment of simply being alive. Although there are, as there always have been, and no doubt always will be, many disturbing things happening in the world, I do follow the news. And therefore, and although there are probably always a few things happening in my own life that can feel sad if I think about them, and although there are occasional moments of irritation or frustration, for the most part, on so-called good days, when the inner light is bright, none of this sticks. It simply passes through like clouds in the sky. But then sometimes the darkness comes and sticks. At least for a while. The inner light seems to grow dim. It happened this past week. For whatever reason, seemingly out of the blue, perhaps because of something as invisible as a shift in barometric pressure or a change in neurochemistry, I woke up one morning recently in a dark place. My daily routine, which seems to get more and more complicated and time-consuming as I age, and this body requires more and more care. She has a, what do they call those things, colostomy bag? She has a colostomy bag because she had cancer and, so that's another aspect of her life. Yet my daily routine, which seems to get more and more complicated time-consuming as I age and this body requires more and more care, suddenly I felt overwhelming, as I am now condemned to be Sisyphus, pushing that huge, heavy boulder uphill over and over for all eternity with no escape. I felt trapped, desperate to break out of my own skin. Reading the news that morning, the mind screamed, "No!" My usual equanimity was nowhere to be found. I felt enraged. As the day unfolded, there was low energy and fatigue along with morphing states of depression, sadness, fury, grief, and despair. I felt small and desperate and angry, alone in my skin, at odds with the world, misunderstood and overwhelmed. I could feel myself sliding into a familiar, cynical, hopeless, angry, self-pitying place that I know is rooted in delusion, but there's a part of me that holds on to this suffering and misery. It's juicy in some way, and it's all about me. It swells the ego. The body felt tight, closed, hardened, armored. There was a pull to engage in self-destructive behavior. I could feel myself getting off on all this despair and hopelessness, wanting to get drunk and listen to Leonard Cohen's final album and wallow around self-righteously in the addictive darkness. No, I didn't drink. I didn't even listen to Leonard, whose music and whose whole being I love dearly. By the way, I just sat still. Maybe all this feels familiar to some of you. I'm guessing that some version of this darkness overtakes most human beings at times, some more than others perhaps, but no one is totally immune. The fact is, life can be hard, and as human beings, we are all soft, vulnerable, sensitive creatures. This body-mind can be hurt in terrible ways. We can pretend otherwise, but anyone who reads the news can't really deny it. We can say it's all a dreamlike illusion, that is not what we think it is, that it's all an appearance in consciousness disappearing instantly by instant like a story written in disappearing ink, as non-substantial as last night's dream. And that's all true and very liberating to realize, but if you're being nailed to the cross or watching your child being blown up in front of you, my guess is that the pain will feel very real indeed. And to me, spirituality isn't about pretending otherwise. I don't see non-dual spirituality as a path to perpetuate bliss. From my perspective, being awake is about total intimacy with life as it is. It's not about escape or turning away. And it's not about trying to find an explanation either, because ultimately we can't. Everything is the way it is because the whole universe is the way it is. The causes of our inner weather, our changing moods, are often invisible and always infinitely complex. Inner and outer, body-mind world is one whole undivided happening. We have stories and explanations after the fact, but the truth is we are mostly clueless. My darkness may have been triggered by an event on the other side of the world that I know nothing about, but that nonetheless affects the whole, as everything always does, whether we know it or not. I went to bed that night in a dark place. I couldn't fall asleep, so I got up again. And then in the wee hours, sitting in my armchair, mysteriously, and for no apparent reason, everything shifted. Maybe the whole universe shifted. The heart opened and the somatic armoring dropped. The hardness softened and melted away. The rage gave way to the open vulnerability of grief and sadness, and there was a deep, all-pervading stillness. This delicate stillness is the jewel beyond all price. In one sense, it's always here, but often it gets covered over by the drama of daily life and the fog of emotion and thought. When all that clears away and only the stillness, the awake presence remains, it always feels like the deepest truth, the deepest reality. It's nothing we can grasp. It isn't solid. We can't see it or pin it down. Some might call it pure spirit, a word which derives from the Latin meaning breath, which is also invisible and ungraspable and often forgotten about. Yet, like the stillness, it is all nourishing and essential to life. This aware presence is the common factor in every different experience, and it belongs to no one. It is boundless, seamless, and dimensionless. Eventually, I went back to bed and fell asleep. In the morning, everything was fresh and bright. So you can hear in what she's describing, right, that there is an awakeness in her. She speaks about things as they actually are, right? But she also describes the fact that within her mind, within her brain, there are still this aspect of being a personality that she referred to when she talked about the darkness. Right? And all of us have these experiences, right? We have them even when we're totally in the form of the personality. We call it anxiety and depression. As a psychologist, I see people all the time that want relief from anxiety and depression and conflict and anger and irritability and restlessness. Yeah. So one of the things I learned as a psychologist was that I was doing more harm than good. Because if I'm helping who you take yourself to be that isn't real to get better, how am I helping you? If I'm helping you as a personality to feel better, I'm giving you tools to alleviate the pain of living a life that's a dream life, an illusion that can never produce happiness, satisfaction, and well-being. So when I started to realize that, I changed the way that I worked with my clients, and instead of trying to improve their personality and give their personality ways to feel better, I gradually help them to recognize that their personality isn't what they are and that it's not real. My practice wasn't as popular after that. You know, when people find out the solution to your the solution to the problem is to get rid of who you think you are. In a lot of the spiritual context, they talk about the fact that when you see things as they are, when you realize the truth, you realize that the problem is you. The problem is you. The problem is the ego. The problem is this personality that you believe that you are that doesn't really exist. And so if you really want happiness, the way to get to be happy is to kill what you take yourself to be, to kill the ego. When people start to get to that point of these teachings and they find out that if I want to really be happy, I have to eliminate me. My happiness will be a result of my absence, the absence of me as a personality. When people hear that, they start getting distracted. They start getting busy with other things, because if I find out that I have to go in order to be happy, I don't know about that. Something about that doesn't feel right, that I have to go, right? But this having to go, this having to go as a personality is not a death in the sense that the body dies. It's not a death in that sense. It's a death in the realization that what you took yourself to be was never what you were. And so how hard is it to get out of something you were never in? This is why I called my last book Dying to Live, right? Because if you die before the body dies, you can be happy. Once the thought process and all of the stuff that creates the illusion that you're the body and that you're real, once that stuff starts to break down a little bit, right? Once the body starts to relax and the mind starts to calm down, all the thinking activity that was in the way and all the contractions in the body that were in the way, blocking the free flow of energy, when that all starts to calm down, it gets pretty easy to see what has always been there. But you couldn't see it because the only thing you could see was your thought activity, and your thought activity is playing in front of it.